Welcome to Tom K's Fishing. Today I'm going to talk about my favorite spring walleye baits. Alright, so there's all kinds of baits you can use in the spring. You know, you got plastics, crankbaits, jigging a minnow, other live bait rigs. There's all kinds of things you can use, all kinds of things that work. These are just going to be kind of my go-to baits in the spring. So first I'll start with plastics. 90% of the time using plastics, I'm using some kind of a swim bait or a paddle tail. Some of my favorite paddle tail are going to be this is a Bee Fish and Tackle Pulsar. You got all these big ribs on it, and then it's a lot softer material, so it has a lot more action in the water. And this is going to be fished a lot more slow, maybe dragging on the bottom, hopping it around. All these you can fish on, you know, a quarter, 3/8, half-ounce jig. Kind of depends on the depth of water and the current you're fishing in. My second favorite swim bait. So this is more, I'm using this when I'm ripping it hard, I'm ripping it through weeds, and that's going to be a power bait ripple shad by Berkley. I like the fire perch color a lot. And same thing, you know, even an 1/8 ounce sometimes, quarter ounce, 3/8 ounce, half ounce, depends on the depth of water. If you're ripping it through weeds, you want something a little heavier so you can rip it through and it's just going to drop back down to the bottom. Another good one that I like to use, and this is more when you're, you know, steady reeling it in, maybe bouncing on the bottom, and that's going to be a Strike King Rage Swimmer. You know, any white or translucent color I like, kind of really imitates a minnow well. And yeah, I'm always just going to fish that on a swim bait head of some kind, usually 3/8 ounce or a half ounce, because I just want that banging on the bottom, slowly swimming, that tail slowly kicking around. And yeah, it's got all these ribs on the side that's giving off all kinds of vibration. You never can go wrong with just a classic twister tail. A lot of times I'll use this in the same kind of situation that I would use the ripple shad in. You know, you're ripping it through the weeds, or sometimes even just dragging it on the bottom, giving it pops. Pretty much any scenario, it just kind of depends what the fish want. All these baits are different actions for different situations, you know. You're not going to want to use something like a ripple shad that's a lot harder body if you're trying to get that slow movement on the bottom. You know, you're going to want to use something like the Bee Fish and Tackle. You know, it's got the real soft plastic on it. It's going to get a lot of action with very slow speeds. Alright, so next thing I talk about is crankbaits. A lot of times you're going to be using these in shallow water. By far, it's no secret that one of my favorite crankbaits to use in the springtime for walleyes is going to be a Rapala Husky Jerk. You know, you can fish them super slow. You're not gonna be banging these into the bottom. You know, you're just gonna get a nice steady action. You can twitch it, give it pauses if the water's cold. You know, usually the colder the water, the longer pause I'll give it, and then eventually, a lot of times I'm just steady reeling it and getting that good action out of the bait. Another good crankbait that I like to use is a Berkley Flicker Shad, and this is just the same kind of thing. You can fish it pretty slow. For the cold water, you know, you can still get a lot of action. You can actually get these down a little deeper if you want to bang into the bottom or anything like that. And next bait I'm going to talk about here is really been a popular walleye bait in the last few years. That's a Rapala Rip and Wrap. Awesome lures. You know, you're getting that reaction strike. The water's warming up. The fish are getting more aggressive. You know, you kind of got to feel what the fish want that day if you want a longer stroke, shorter stroke, you know, but a lot of rattles, good for dirty water. They can hear it from a long ways away, they can feel it from a long ways away, and it's just an awesome bait. I like the number 6, some guys go up to the number 7, and yeah, favorite colors are probably the Fire Tiger, and any kind of a perch pattern is real good. Another bait that has become very popular in the last few years is going to be some kind of a jigging wrap. Or I really like the shiver minnows. You know, it's got that erratic action, hopping off the bottom, falling fast, hopping off the bottom, falling fast. Another good lure from the water's warming up. Those fish are getting more aggressive. I like these in clear water. A lot of times, you know, if you can't get them to go on a rip and wrap, maybe it's just too much action, too loud, too much vibration. This is kind of a finesse side of power fishing. You know, you're still getting that big fall, that big jerk. The two main ones I use are Rapala Jig and Wrap, and then this one I think is by Moonshine Baits or something like that, and that's the Shiver Minnow. The Shiver Minnow's got a lot heavier head, so it kind of falls more downwards, where this one you can kind of get more glide out of it, but you're still getting that same action. Awesome fishing vertical, awesome casting them out, ripping them back. Another awesome bait. And another thing I'll do, the shiver minnows don't have a hook in the front like a Jigging Rap would. A lot of times you're fishing in rivers or just snaggy areas. I'll just clip that front hook off the Jigging Rap and you won't get snagged as much. You won't lose as many lures. The last bait that obviously I think everybody uses a lot in the spring, I know I use it a lot in the spring, and that's just your classic jig and a minnow. There's all kinds of different jigs you can use, you know, all different brands, shapes, sizes, whatever. Some of my favorite ones, probably my go-to one most times is going to be a VMC Mooneye jig. Pretty much always 1/4 ounce or 3/8 ounce. I like that, you know, it's got a narrower head on it. It's not pushing so much water. You can kind of hop that jig a little faster. And yeah, especially if you're fishing the weeds, you can kind of rip it through the weeds. It's not going to have as much surface area for the weeds to grab on there. So that's an awesome jig. My second favorite jig, probably more so when you get late spring, even into summer, or if it's really cold and the fish are just nibbling on the minnow, is going to be who makes this? I think a Northland Fireball jig, and it's got a real short hook shank on it. So then walleyes come up, you know, they're sucking on the minnow. You know, they don't have that whole big long hook to suck on or have in their mouth like a Mooneye jig or a lot of other jigs. So I mainly use this just for that short hook shank on it. I think that's pretty awesome. And then awesome jig I like in dirty water is, I don't know who makes this, Acme. An Acme Google Eye jig. And it's got little rattles in there, makes a lot of noise. This jig is good, you know, if you're going to get more drag on this. It's very wide and the eyes stick out, but you got that loud, that, you know, they can feel that, they can hear that in dirty water situations. And yeah, it's just another good jig. Another very important thing to using all these baits and any bait, you know, is your line selection. I'm always using a fluorocarbon leader, and I like the Berkley Vanish. Dirtier water, you know, I'm going to use a 12 or 14 pound leader. You know, you don't need to worry so much about the fish seeing it, but it's very abrasion resistant and a little stronger if you are getting snagged. You know, you're not losing all your jigs or your rip wraps or whatever. So that's what I always use for a leader. You know, from clear water, it's a lot lighter, you know, 8, 10, sometimes 12 pound leaders, but always fluorocarbon. And then for mainline, I'm always using braid. I absolutely love this Power Pro High Vis Yellow. And a lot of times, you know, I use a little bigger reels than a lot of people would use for a spinning setup for walleyes. And I like the 20 pound braid. I don't get as many wind knots in it. And, you know, I never have to worry about, you know, breaking your line up, your main line or anything like that. I think it still has plenty of sensitivity for walleye fishing. And, yeah, you just don't get as many wind knots and tangles in your reel and everything else. So pretty sweet stuff. And then another very important part to all these baits is obviously your rod selection. For, you know, a jig and a minnow, fishing plastics normally, pretty much always using a 7-foot medium light. I like these Fenwick HMG rods. They got a nice tip on them. You can feel bites good. You know, you got lots of rod to fight the fish on. You know, it takes big shocks from the fish. Always using a medium light when I'm using jigging wraps. It's a super easy bait for a fish to throw, so it's just nice to have that extra bit of, you know, bend in the rod to keep those fish pinned. And really the only time I'm probably not using a medium light is fishing a rip and wrap, and that I'm going to use usually a 7-foot, sometimes a 6'6" or a 6'10" medium. And that's just, you know, you get plenty of action out of those baits. You can rip them hard enough, and when you pull up and that fish is on there, it's instantly getting hooked. And you know, even if you're not ripping it that hard, you still get a good hook into that fish, and you're not playing with that sensitive tip and trying to really reef back on the rod and get it hooked. So yeah, that's pretty much everything. Those are all my favorite walleye baits in the spring, and that's how I fish them. So yeah, thanks for watching the video. I hope it helped you out, gave you some pointers or maybe some direction on where to go for your bait selection, your rod selection, line selection, stuff like that. For springtime walleyes, make sure to follow me on Instagram and like us on Facebook at Tom K's Guide Service. And yeah, keep watching, keep waiting for videos to come up. We'll be doing a lot more kind of tips and tricks, how-tos on different baits for different species, different situations, time of year, stuff like that. So, and don't forget to subscribe.